Hey everyone, Brick City Brown Chick coming at you with another episode. This episode is being released on Thursday, June 12th. So I wanted to say happy Loving Day to all who celebrate. This episode will be a little different for me and a lot different for my other half, who is joining the episode to talk about today's topic, interracial marriage. Is it really all that different? Now, what does the topic have to do with my opening about Loving Day? June 12th is the anniversary in 1967 when the United States Supreme Court decided in the case Loving v. Virginia that interracial marriage was legal throughout the United States. Before that time, some states allowed interracial marriage and some states did not. One of the places that did allow it was Washington, D.C. So a couple appropriately named Mildred and Richard Loving got married in the District of Columbia in Washington, D.C., and then went back to their home in rural Virginia. Virginia did not accept their marriage as legal because Mildred was Black and Richard was white. So upon finding out about the marriage, Richard was thrown in jail and spent, I think, a couple of years there while this case made its way through the courts. So in the decision of the Lovings versus Virginia, the Supreme Court said, Virginia, we're striking down your law, and any other states that have such a law, interracial marriage will now be legal. Today in 2025, approximately 11% of all marriages in the United States are among couples from different races. That has gone slowly but steadily up in the years since Loving v. Virginia. A lot of people will tell you that it's not a big deal that people of different races can get married. But if you understand anything about the current United States administration, one of the things they would like to do is to go back to a time when interracial marriage was not legal. Whenever people talk to me about issues like this, one of the first things they always say is, oh, that was such a long time ago. It drives me crazy. When we're talking about civil rights, my mother is 90 years old. My mother went to grade school and high school and college during the Jim Crow era. So my philosophy is anything that's happened within her lifetime is not a long time ago. Loving v. Virginia was decided 3 years before I was born. That was not a long time ago. So one of the things I really want to do with this episode is not only give people an insight into my own marriage, but make people think about some of the issues interracial couples face in the United States. As I said in the beginning, my other half has agreed to join me for this episode. He has agreed to be heard, not seen. That's his choice. He doesn't like the way he looks on camera, which is fine. So I'm just going to ask him now to just wave into the frame so that you know I'm not sitting here just talking to myself and doing some sort of ventriloquist trick. I'll give you a quick background on the two of us. If you're new to the podcast, these are things you don't know. If you're an OG, you've heard me say all these things in some way or form. We have been married 25 and a half years. We got married in 1999. And we've been together as a couple almost 30 years. So at this point, more than half of both our lives, which is kind of frightening. We lived together almost 3 years before we got married, and we lived basically between a couple of towns in Maryland before we bought our house and settled down. Our only remaining living parent is my mother, who, as I said, is 90 years old. She lives on her own, and that's good for all of us involved because that would be super stressful. And we are childless by choice, which simply means when we got married, we didn't want to have any children, and therefore we do not have any children. That's always confounding to people. When people ask me how long I've been married, the next question is immediately, how many children do you have? And when I say none, they kind of look at me like they're waiting for a sad story, like I was infertile, or I had a bunch of miscarriages, or whatever. Nope, it's none of that. We're childless by choice and very good with that decision after 30 years.
Yeah. That was one of the deal breakers.
Yes. When you get married, you both have to be on the same page about not only whether you want children, but also when you want to have those children. If a woman is a little older, she may want to have children immediately, whereas her husband may be like, we could wait 5 years. And she's like, no, we can't. I'm 40. We got to do this now. So that's one of those immediate deal breakers. If you start dating someone and they want children and you don't, or vice versa, that is totally not going to work. Okay, as far as these questions go, these are questions I wrote that my husband has not seen.
Rude.
It's not rude. That way you get more authentic, genuine answers. Okay. All right, you ready to play 25 questions?
Sure, why not? Do I get a prize at the end?
Sure. All right, the first question people always ask us is, how did we meet?
Oh, how did we meet? We met via a personal ad that I took out in the Washington City paper. And it was interesting because instead of just putting an ad in the paper as I'm seeking this or I'm looking for that, I put a poem in it. And Kim was one of the women who responded, and one of the women who responded who actually wanted to meet me as opposed to just trying to figure out why I put a poem in as a personal ad. So that was how we initially met, and after a few phone calls, we had our first date, which was very interesting. And then after that, we were almost pretty inseparable.
Now, for people under a certain age, I'm sure you're going, what in the world is a personal ad? So, if you're used to internet dating, this is what people did before there was the internet. You would take out an ad in the personal section of a newspaper and say, I'm looking for this, or I'm looking for this, like I want a relationship, or I want somebody who I can hang out with, or whatever the parameters were. So that is indeed how we met. Who asked who out first?
That would be me. Seeing as how I'm the one who took out the ad, I was the one meeting you and I was the one pursuing you. Because let's face it, you were not in the best mind space when it came to men.
When we met, I was 2, maybe 3 months out of what I can only describe as I won't use the word toxic, everybody use that. It was a terrible relationship. It just was. And not because I was terrible or he was terrible, it's that we were not compatible and we made each other's lives hell for a period of time. So, one of the first things my husband asked me when we met was like, why are you single? That was one of the questions. And my response was, I am single because all men suck. And whenever I tell that to people, they're like, and he came back? That is, he was interested, because if a woman said that to me, I'd have been like, oh no, too much baggage. I am out of here. But I was very honest about the men I had dated before him and what my concerns were and what my issues were. And so I think he appreciated that I was just honest about it.
Well, I wasn't in the mindset to play games or anything like that, and and still am very focused on being in a long-term relationship and not wanting to goof around and play games or do testing or all the other nonsense people seem to want to do. So, again, I appreciated you laying it out what I was getting myself into, and I decided that I liked you. You're fun. You're interesting. Pretty. Not pretty, but you're very pretty because you were very well dressed on our first date. And was I wearing sandals?
I think so.
Yeah, I've never been one for dressing up on occasions because I didn't have the money to do it. Regardless, I was able to see her behind the hurt. And being able to see her, I figured, you know what? She's the one.
And that's something I hear a lot of sort of bloggers and podcasters say now, is that men know they're interested within the first few minutes of meeting you, and they know whether they want a serious relationship with you within like a couple of dates. And I remember hearing that when I was younger and thinking, that's absolutely ridiculous. Like, that's supposed to be one of the things that drive men crazy about women, is that we meet someone and then we start like planning the fairy tale and all that. So to hear that men have already made that decision a couple of dates in, I was like, what men are you talking? Like, what are you talking about? But my husband has always said, he knew really early on that he was going to be serious about me. So I was like, okay, maybe that is true, but it still boggles my mind, because men are always complaining that women, men play checkers and women play chess. Like, women are always 3, 4 moves down the road, and the men's like, what happened? I got run over by a bus. How long was it before you knew that she or he would be the one? He told his side. It probably took me a couple of months, because, as he said, I was coming from a place of hurt. So I was more cautious about trusting him, because one of the issues in my immediate previous relationship was having trusted someone who, it's not that he was untrustworthy, he just didn't know what he wanted. Translation, he didn't really want me, but was still trying to figure that out. So I was much more cautious about, okay, we're gonna see where this goes. But yeah, it probably took me a little longer than it took him. How long did you date before you got engaged?
Oh,
I'll let him tell this story because it's funny.
that's a fun one. Let's see. We were together probably, I want to say, about 6 months. And bearing in mind, both of us were under 25. And that's understandable because, again, we met almost 30 years ago and we're in our 50s. So, in laying that out, I got to the conclusion early on that I wanted to spend the rest of my life with Kim, and that was that. I made my decision. I stuck by it. I decided it. All I need now was for her to agree to this
Plan.
minor little plan.
Easier said than done.
So I sat her down and I talked about it with her, and I said, I really like you. I would like to get married with you. Her response? Not yet. It wasn't a no.
Yep.
It was a not yet. Because again, 6 months, some people might say it's a little early. I'm not a lot of people. I'm not a lot like a lot of people in that I don't play games. I tell you right up front exactly what I'm thinking. And if I want to be with you, I will let you know that ahead of time and say, look, I like you. I want to be with you. I didn't take that as a rejection. So I understood. Not now is not no. So, well, the time went by. I said, okay, we've been together a little bit longer. You've had some time to think that and understand my mindset where I'm not just trying to pull some wool over your eyes and bamboozle you or whatever else that you went through with the previous boyfriends. I really want to be with you and I want to marry you. And she said, I will not marry you before you're 25.
26.
26? You said 25.
No, it was 26. It was
Oh.
always 26.
So,
Now, one thing to understand is I am 3 years older than he is. So I was very much like, we need to slow the roll on this because statistically, divorce rates are higher among people who get married before the age of 25 as opposed to after the age of 25. And that makes total sense, right? If you're 20 or 22 years old and you get married and you hear, yeah, love, honor, cherish, sickness, health, the rest of my life, yada, yada, sure, fine. You don't really understand what you're saying. And then you wake up at 30 or 35 and you're like, oh my God, I can't stand this person. I want out of this. So I really did want to give our marriage every opportunity to succeed. So I did say, I will not marry you a day before you turn 26. And he was not happy about that.
well,
But he understood.
in the sense of not happy about it, it was more along the lines of I didn't see it so much as the issue where you were worried about, the immature nature of younger people and their inability to understand basic concepts. Part of that was I was somewhat affronted that I was being lumped into the category of
everybody
else's thought patterns. Because my thought patterns, as I said, yeah, I was interested in her when I met her, and I'm like, okay, she's the one. I ain't gonna be looking. I'm not playing games. I'm not testing. This is her. This is her. I see her for who she is. I want to be with her. Let's go.
Yeah. So obviously we solved that issue. But initially, yeah, he was kind of like, what?
Road.
This is a question I get a lot. Had I dated white men before him? The answer is yes. And to be perfectly honest, all the men I've ever seriously dated have been white. Now, that always gets into psychology with people about why is that? Is that because, your, single black mother raised you and she hated black men, so you hated black men? All right, none of that's true. I grew up with both my parents. They were married for 27 years when my dad died. I had a great father. He never put limitations on me and thought I could do anything. He never said, because you're a girl, fill in the blank. So I loved my father. He was a very positive influence in my life, but all the men who ever asked me out, on a serious basis were white. And because my parents raised me, my parents were Christians and they were like, you love everybody. This, there is no, like, color is not a thing, gender is not a thing. Like, love everybody, period, unless somebody specifically gives you a reason not to. So I was never closed off to the idea of dating someone who was not black. And I know that is not true for all Black women. My other video this week, I'm going to be talking about Black women who date out, Black women who date outside their race, and the issues they face and how tricky that is for a lot of Black women. So I'll be talking about that this week. But yes, all the men I've ever seriously dated have been white. So this was not news for my mother. That's what I'll say. It wasn't news. Was it a surprise? Yeah, it was. Had you dated Black women before?
I was not limited in the women I dated. They had to capture my interest first. And by capture my interest, they had to be a person that I wanted to get to know. They had to be a person who was able to articulate what they want. I never went and said, I'm going to stick to this, or I'm going to stick to that, or this fits my ideal. My ideal is someone who is intelligent, who can express themselves, who are honest, kind, thoughtful, attractive. And attractive to me means a lot of things. It also means I find you attractive, so get over it.
I've been here 26 years. I mean, come on. Did it matter to you that I was Black? Like, was that a thing?
No, not in the least.
Did it matter to me that he was white? No, it didn't. But I knew that it would matter to other people, i.e., my mother, i.e., my extended family. And that's one of the things I don't think a lot of people understand or people assume about interracial relationships. When the other partner is white, regardless of what the other side of the couple is, people always assume, because white people are the standard, right? In America, in Europe, in the world, white people think they are the standard for everything. So what people automatically think is, okay, the people who had to have issue with this relationship had to be the white people. And that is not always the case, especially in Black families and especially for Black women. Because Black men have been dating out since, I don't know, just after slavery. For Black women, this has been a much harder hill to climb, right? Not just because we're marrying somebody who's not a Black man, which it gets drilled into our heads as Black women, like, you should marry a Black man and you should keep the Black family together and this. But it is also the attitude of, if you as a Black woman marry a white man, you are marrying the oppressor. You are marrying the people who enslaved us. How is that okay in your head? And I'll talk about that in more detail in my other video this week. But there's a lot more, I guess I'll call it, baggage for Black women who marry white men. Now, I don't know if it was because of how I was raised or what it was, but when I got married, I did not feel all of that social stigma about it. I've heard a lot of women since talk about that and how they feel about it, but that was not something I felt. I feel like when my family got to know my husband, they were like, okay, he's a good guy. He loves her. He makes her happy. We've gotten to know him. Okay, we're good with this. But that took a minute. It really did. Did you always want to marry a Black woman? Or was that just like, it's just what happened?
No, it wasn't so much what happened. It's, again, you have to understand my mindset. My mindset is very focused, especially at that time, as I was going into my late teens, early 20s. I was looking for somebody who I could trust, somebody who I could rely on, somebody who would be there for me because I would want to be there for them. Now, of the women I dated, you're the only one that gave me that assurance that I would not be alone in the relationship. So that was my focus. Now, you happen to be black, didn't bother me. Didn't bother my mother. The rest of my family doesn't matter. But again, we're back to that was my focus. That's what I wanted. I wanted somebody who would be there with me and I would not have to worry that at some point down the road I would be abandoned.
Did I always want to marry a white person? I'll be perfectly honest. When I was in my late teens, early 20s, I had no interest in marrying anybody. It was not something I planned for. It was not a goal. Like I know a lot of women who've gone to college specifically to find a man because that's the time in your life where you're around the most eligible men is college. So they got a degree. That was sort of the backstory to, oh, I'm looking for a husband. I was not looking for anybody when I was in college. I dated a guy for a year and a half and that crashed and burned. And then I was single for my last 3 years of college and I was perfectly good with that. So when I started dating, like in my mid 20s, I was not looking for forever. I was not planning for that. That is what happened, but it wasn't a goal. It wasn't if I don't get married, my life is over. I've never been one of those women. Some people say that's the secret to finding your spouse is not being desperate and not being like, oh my God, my biological clock and this and this and this. I have no idea. I just know that my life worked out differently than I thought it would. I thought I'd be single my entire life, and I haven't been. And that's been a good thing, but I think it's been a good thing because I didn't come from like a place of desperation about it. How did your mothers react? And this is where people are always like, yeah, it's all well and good that you love this person, but what are the ripples and ramifications in the families? So I'll let you go first.
Oh, I will have to state this because for understanding my family, my mother was probably one of the sweetest, nicest people you would
Absolutely.
ever meet, who would also knock your lights out if you did something stupid.
Yeah.
Now, when I told her I wanted her to meet my girlfriend, she had never met any of them before except one, which she didn't make a very great impression on her. So I said to her, she's probably going to be the one that I'm going to be with because I'd already made that decision. I just had to convince Kim of this. So when my mother met Kim, she was fully aware of who she was, and they got on like a house on fire. They clicked because again, their personalities, while not the same, had enough similarities that they were able to see where the other one was coming from. And also for my mother, her best friend, my godmother, is black. Her other friend that she had was black. So my mother didn't really see races in the same way you would think other white women would. She was very open-minded, down to earth about it, and she was ecstatic that I had Kim in my life because she saw how much it made me feel safe and complete and knowing that I had somebody there.
My mother was kind of a different story. The story I always tell is when I sat my mother down, she'd met a couple times by this point, and when I sat her down and said, listen, he wants to get married. I've told him not yet, but this is probably going to happen. Her reaction was, of course, first she said, are you sure this is something you want to do? Like, this was 1999. Like, this country, and ironically, 2025, it's still not, but she said, this country has not gotten over its racial wounds or dealt with its racist past. Are you sure this is a good thing? Like, what if you end up living in a community where people show up and burn crosses on your lawn? And at that point in time, I thought that was funny because I was like, haven't we left that in the past? But no, we haven't. She was absolutely correct. That's not something that's ever happened to us, but she was making a point. And so I said, listen, Mom, I love him. This is where we are. We're on the same page about not having kids. We're on the same page about all these other things. And this is what it is. I was like, and this is how you and Dad raised me. Like, this is, you love everybody. And what she said is one of those all-time classics from my mother that I just busted out laughing. She was totally serious, but it just struck me as funny in the moment. She said, I understand that we raised you to love everyone. I just didn't realize you were going to take it literally and it was going to show up at my doorstep. Which was a totally honest feedback. I think a lot of parents feel like that. A lot of parents feel, for whatever reason, religiously obligated, morally obligated, whatever, to raise their children in order to be good people. You love everyone and you don't hold grudges and you don't hold current people responsible for the sins of their past or their ancestors or whatever. So that is what she and my father did. But yeah, doing it with no understanding that someday this was going to be presented to her and she was going to have to actually deal with it. So initially she was kind of hesitant about it, not because of who is, but because of her experience. And I used to get really frustrated with her, but then I'd have to sit down and go, okay, I didn't live through Jim Crow. I didn't live through people spitting in my face and calling me the N-word. I did not live through that. So I really did have to have a come to Jesus with myself about her and her reactions and how she felt. And I sort of had to check my anger about it. And did she come around eventually? Yes. Do she and Brian get along really well now? Yes. When Brian's mother died, we'd been married 6 years, 2005. Yeah, 6 years.
6 years.
And one of the things my mother said to him after the fact was, I am your mother now. So she my mother was never like way over here, but let's say she was here. She came from here to there. And that was a whole lot for her because anybody who knows my mother knows that she's not much on changing her mind. Once she has her mind made up about something, it is what it is, and you're not going to convince her otherwise. So she really did come a long way. So that was a big hurdle. Did you expect the reaction your mother had? I wasn't surprised by my mother's reaction. What about you?
Wasn't either, but again, my mother was very different,
Open, yeah.
for her time.
Mm-hmm.
And for us, a lot of it was, does she make you happy? If she makes you happy and if she's there for you, I could care less about the package.
Yeah. And she was very clear to me about that. And that was a good thing because I'm sure there were people in his family who were not so jazzed about it. I don't think it was your grandmother was against it. It was
No.
just something.
Her mindset.
Yeah, it was before. This was something that happened way after her time. Let's look at it that way. What I always say is when people get irritated with the language people use around things, I say you have to look at what the language was in their time. And a funny brief side story about Ryan's grandmother. Ryan's grandmother was Sicilian. So she and I were nearly the same complexion, which I found kind of funny, but okay. So one day we went over there, we were going to take her out to dinner, and she was on the phone with a friend of hers. Now, at that point, we'd been dating 4 or 5 months, like not a long time. And she was talking to her friend, and she said, "Well, I gotta go. My grandson and his new girlfriend are here to pick me up to take me out." And then her friend said whatever she said on the other end of the phone, and she said, "Oh no, I told you he's dating that nice colored girl." I don't know whose head whipped around faster, mine or Brian's. It was just like, what?
Thanks a lot, Grandma. Thanks, Grandma.
And then I really did have to stand there and go, okay, Kim, this is a woman in her 80s. This is the word that was used when she was young, and she just never adapted. She never picked up Negro. She never picked up African American. She never picked up Black. Colored was the word she used, so that was the word. And Frank was just like, she got off the phone and he was like, "Grandma, what is wrong with you?" And she's like, "What?" Like she had no idea what she had done. So yeah, you've got to meet people where they are, is what I always tell people.
Unfortunately, she was probably the only other family member I had that were human about my relationship. The rest of my family,
that's a story for a whole nother time. I'll encourage him to come back and he can tell that story, because that's a whole different story. Did everyone behave on your wedding day?
In the sense of not causing issues because they had issues with us getting married. Now, did we have someone sample the wedding cake ahead of time? Yes. But that's cultural. I didn't blame her for that.
She was a family friend. It's
a cultural thing, so I wasn't upset about that. Now, did somebody stupidly say while we were exchanging cake, "Don't smash the cake in her face"?
They did.
And I'm thinking to myself, well, I'm not stupid enough to do that. A, it's rude. B, it's obnoxious. C, it's a waste of good cake.
People think that's a trend, from 5 years ago or 2 years ago. It's not. People have been smashing cake in people's faces for generations. Is it cute? No. Would I have walked out of the reception and immediately gotten an annulment? Probably, because I spent a whole lot of time, money, and effort on what I looked like, and so no, that would not have been okay. Would his mother and my mother have probably jacked him up? Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Your mother probably would have knocked my butt out.
Nobody would have been happy about that.
And it's a waste of good cake.
It is. We had a great cake. That would have been a waste of cake. Given America's history and America's current political climate, were you, this question for you, at all nervous about tying your financial future to mine? And that's from the perspective of, Black people get treated differently in financial institutions. People like to think that's not a thing, but it's a thing. So when we were getting ready to buy a house, it was like, okay, is this buy going to go through, even though we both have good credit, yada, yada, because they just don't want me involved in it.
It never bothered me in that sense because, again, I wanted somebody who I could rely on and who could rely on me. So knowing you are a very intelligent woman led me to think, okay, she's not going to make ridiculous choices when it comes to her financial future. Now, can that knowledge that I have translate into going into a bank or going into a mortgage company or going to a car dealership and having issues? Yes, because people are stupid, people are ignorant, people are obnoxious. Now, all I thought at the time was, you know what? We'll work through it. And if there's someone with an issue, we'll go somewhere else. I don't have that need to deal with stupidity.
And he says this about me all the time, but it's also true about him. He doesn't suffer fools well. I know I don't, but he doesn't either. So, how did your relationship change after you got married?
Not much.
That's what I say too.
Because, neither of us were playing I like to call it the dating game, where, we're trying to assess and test and, see if this person's going to react this way or that way. So, in that sense, you've already made the commitment. You've already agreed in front of all these people that you're going to be with this person and cherish them and love them. So now I've got to act like it. So no, our relationship, the only thing that has changed is maybe we've gotten older.
Yeah. Our relationship literally went to, okay, we were dating and we were engaged and then we got married. But marriage was not, I hear a lot of people, especially men, talk about what a hurdle it was for them first to get married and then to be married, to have to, I don't want to say answer to, but that's what it boils down to have to be communicative and responsible to the other person. If you're going to hang out with your guy friends on a Friday night, you have to call your wife and say, I'm going to hang out with my guy friends. I'll be home at, I don't know, 10 o'clock, midnight, whatever. We never went through that, mainly because Ben doesn't make friends easily. It's not his thing. But it was, people would ask me, like, okay, well, doesn't he get upset that you go and hang out with your girlfriends? I'm like, no, because he knows I'm with my girlfriend. Like, it just wasn't a huge adjustment for us, but I know it is for other people. What do we think is the biggest difference between our marriage and a marriage between people of the same race?
Frankly, if you want brass tacks, there is no difference because you're both humans. You assume that the person you're going to be with is on the level of wanting to be with you. That's your broad assumption. Now, as I said before, the packaging of these people doesn't particularly matter so much. Can it bring baggage in? Yes. Can it bring family drama in? Yes. But that's true of people of the same race. Mm-hmm. And frankly, I've said this before, I'll say it again, white people will find anything to fight about.
It's very true. It truly is. Do people still stare at you or make comments?
Yes.
If they do, how do you react?
Not well. Not well.
I have to say, and maybe this is because I have, for most of my life, been a Black woman in white spaces, and I don't know, a lot of Black people can relate to that. So I have long since stopped really paying attention to what we now call microaggressions, to like stares and comments. I just don't care. I just don't pay it any mind. So Brian is much more observant about things like that than I am, because I long ago learned to block it out.
Yeah, it's aggravating because, again, I don't care how you feel. I really don't. If you think what I'm doing is wrong, fine. Keep it to yourself. I don't need to hear it. I don't need to know it. I don't need to see it. And if you're dumb enough to walk up to us or say something in my earshot, well, then you're going to get what you're going to get.
Right.
That could be either a nasty look, an aggravated growl, or a stare. Would I get physical? Only if someone initiated something. Conversely, I like to think about the positive people around us too. There have been people who have said, hey, y'all look real happy.
Mm-hmm. Strangers, people have come up to us.
It's like, again, if you're going to marry someone and be with them for the rest of your life, you want to be happy, don't you?
You hope you're happy. Do you feel like this current political climate has enabled people or emboldened people to be
to fly their
nastier?
Nasty flag boldly
to
and
fly their
proudly?
racist flags proudly. Absolutely. I had an incident yesterday, which I don't even think I told you about. I went to the Macy's in the town I live in. Now, what you have to understand about where we live is this town is a planned community. And I don't mean that in the modern sense. This town was founded in the 1960s by a wealthy man who just had this view that he'd come through the 60s and he wanted to live somewhere where everybody lived together and nobody cared. And so he founded this town on that premise. So this is a very ethnically and racially diverse community. Just on the street we live on, there are black people and white people and Asian people and old people and young people. And our street is sort of a small version of this entire town. That's what the town is. That's what it bases its laws and its bylaws on. And everybody who lives here understands that. But yesterday, I was looking through the racks in Macy's, and a woman who was shopping with her husband, I assume, had put down her purse on the floor that the aisle I was in, and the two of them had gone wandering off. And she came back around and saw me in the aisle where her bag was on the floor, which I hadn't even noticed. And she whispered something to him, and he comes marching over to the aisle I'm in, looks at me, picks up her bag and snatches it and walks away. In that moment, I was just so annoyed. I looked at them and literally yelled across the store, I guarantee you I have more money in my purse than you do. And everybody's looking around. I was like, oh my God, I can't today. I'm not in the mood. So, yeah, I do think this political climate has emboldened people to be more racist than they usually would be. And what I keep saying is, people have to be careful of the things they do in public. As long as you're typing and hiding behind a computer screen, you can be as mean and nasty and racist as you want. But when you start doing things to real people in real life, there are going to be real consequences. And we have seen that quite a bit lately. What advice would you give to a young interracial couple about how the world is, about how their life's going to be, about challenges they're going to face?
In this particular climate, I would say be ready to move. Be ready and able and plan what you need to do to keep yourself safe. Because bottom line is, we keep going down this rabbit hole of stupidity that we're in right now. Eventually, people who are not white, and particularly white men with money and landowners, we got to go back to that nonsense, are going to be the only people who have any guarantee of safety in this country. So if you're in a relationship with somebody who is not of your race, not of your religion, not of your ethnicity, and you want to be with that person, be prepared. Be prepared to make sure that that person is as safe as possible.
And I would echo that and also say that if you are a white person in a relationship with someone who is not white, it is imperative that you understand and have empathy for the person you're in a relationship with. What do I mean by that? What I mean is you cannot base your plan for your future on your experience as a white person because you don't have any idea what that other person is going through. You're really going to have to focus and get in your mind that just because you as a white person are going to be safe doesn't mean the person you're in a relationship with is going to be safe. We have already seen several deportations of people who were not white, who were married to people who were white. And the white part of the couple who's still here is like, I don't understand what happened. They're married to me. That doesn't mean they're safe. And that doesn't mean they're going to be okay. So when you start thinking about planning a future with the person you love, just know that you're going to have to let them lead in terms of if they feel safe, if they feel like they need to flee, what kind of plan they feel like they need to make for the two of you. And I understand from a man's perspective that if the man is the person who's white, that's going to be really hard because men are not used to taking the back seat and saying, okay, I can't be the leader here. But you've got to think of this from their perspective and not yours. And that would be my advice.
Take your ego out of it
Yes.
and look at it as this person you love, this person you want to be with. You want to make sure this person is safe and make sure this person is happy. And if your ego is in the way of that, you need to check it and say, I don't care about anybody else's perception of what's going on. Bottom line is this person I want to be with needs to be safe and feel safe.
Correct. Absolutely. 100%. Okay, last question. You survived the whole questioning. Given all you know now, given almost 26 years of marriage, would you make the same choice? Would you marry the same person again?
Why on earth do you think I don't want to renew my wedding vows? I'm not giving you the option to get away. You're mine. I'm yours. That's it.
We celebrated our 25th anniversary last year. And one of the things I wanted to do was go to a tropical climate, which, okay, we did. We went to Mexico. And I wanted to renew our wedding vows. And I've made this suggestion before. Our 20th anniversary, I made the suggestion. I think our 15th anniversary, I made the suggestion. And he always absolutely vetoes it. And what he says is,
I'm not giving you the option to think and say, oh, wait, I ain't going to tie myself to this fool no more.
And what I always say is, that's not legal. You can't get divorced just because you go to renew your vows and say, I don't want to do this. Not a driver's license. It doesn't expire. That's not how it works. If I wanted to divorce you, that would be a whole legal process. You can't go and do vows and go, yeah, I don't want to do this anymore. Now we're divorced. It doesn't work like
that. You think I'm going to chance that now?
No. Like that.
I'm not chancing it. Sorry.
What I always say is, second time around is when you should get to do real vows. You should get to do vows based on your experience, not that the vows you took on your wedding day aren't real, but they're kind of generic. They're kind of like, oh yeah, I promise to do X and Y and Z and I'll love you and take care of you and blah, blah, blah. But I think second time vows, you ought to be able to talk about real stuff. Like, I promise to not smack you in the back when you're snoring. That's a real vow. You got one?
Do I have a vow? I promise not to get aggravated when you need some time to cool down.
Yes. Yeah. That was our first few years of marriage. That was a big thing. And part of that is because a good friend of mine says all the time, we are only children. We know how to play well by ourselves. And that's absolutely true. When you grow up as an only child, you learn to work through your own crap and your own anger because your friends aren't always around. You don't have any siblings and you're not talking to your parents about your stuff because you're just not. So you learn how to do that. And Brian has never been that person. If he's pissed off, you're going to know he's pissed off and he's going to tell you about it. I am pissed off. I need to go somewhere for a few minutes by myself or a couple hours and process it and deal with it. And then I can come talk to you about it. But in the beginning, he was like, what is this? Why are you just? And I'm like, okay, I've always been like this. Like, this is who it's the play well by yourself. I'm used to being able to process my own stuff by myself. And that was one of the big compromises we did have to make when we got married was I had to get to a place where I couldn't spend half a day moping and doing the stuff I used to do when I was single because he doesn't deal with that well. He takes that as I'm mad at him. Okay, I'm not mad at him. I'm mad at whatever the situation is, but I've got to process and deal before I can communicate it in any useful manner. Let's put it like that.
Yeah. And I always took that as you don't trust me enough to rely on.
Right. And that's not the case.
And again, this is one of the things you learn over time.
Yep. Marriage is always work. That's the thing I will close with. Regardless of what kind of marriage you have, if it's same race, if it's interracial, if it's gay, if it's bisexual, whatever the marriage is always work. And so my advice always to single women is you think you want to be married because you grew up with the fairy tale, whatever marriage is, the white picket fence and the 2.5 kids and the whatever. Life is always going to throw challenges at you that's going to sort of send it off on a curve. And you've got to be ready for the curves. So think wisely and choose well. The best thing I can say is choose well. Make a good choice. Because if you make the wrong choice, you're going to be miserable. He's going to be miserable. You're going to make each other miserable. And that's not what you want for your life. So make sure you make good choices. Do you have any closing thoughts?
Not a one. That was a good summation. I love it.
All right. I want to thank my other half for joining me today. The social media is not his bailiwick at all. So I appreciate him being here. Maybe eventually, if I do this podcast long enough, it's been a year and a half now. If I do it long enough, maybe I'll talk him into being on camera. I doubt it. I doubt it, but hope springs eternal. So I want to thank everybody for joining me this week. Again, happy Loving Day to all, and I will see you again next week. Take care.